Another African soldier seizes power. People cheer. Again, Burkina Faso's captain, Ibrahim Traoré, 36 years old, boots on the ground, beret on his head. And somehow, suddenly, he's the poster child for freedom. The West is evil, democracy is fake, and coups? Apparently they're back in style. But let's be honest, if you replace a ballot box with a rifle, are you really free? Or just switching who holds the gun? And here's the part nobody wants to say out loud. This isn't anti-imperialism. It's anti-responsibility. Because building a nation is hard. Blaming others? Easy. Let me ask you something, and I want your honest take. Where are you watching this from? Are you in the US? In Europe? Maybe in West Africa? And more importantly, would you trade your local mayor for a military captain? Drop a comment. Would you let a soldier run your town, your city, your life? This is Legends by the River, where we question the trends before they turn into disasters. We don't chase hype, we dissect it. If you're here for facts, not fantasy, welcome home, like, share. And stay loud in the comments. This space is yours too. Now, let's get into it. Because Uganda's general may be praising Traoré, but not every uniform comes with honor. A military general in Africa publicly endorses another country's coup leader, not in a private briefing, not in a leak, but in broad daylight, on social media. And not just any general, the son of Uganda's president. There's something unnerving about how normal this moment felt, as if a high-ranking officer praising a foreign military takeover was just another Tuesday online. But here's where it gets even more bizarre. Muhoozi didn't just nod to Ibrahim Traoré in Burkina Faso. He applauded him, admired him, invited him. And in a region where words from a uniform often carry more weight than ballots ever did, this wasn't just a compliment. It was a ripple in a pond that's been eerily still. To be fair, many in the West might not even blink at this. After all, it's easy to scroll past yet another African general tweeting fire. But imagine this. A top US general tweets support for a foreign military coup, calls the leader visionary, and offers a formal invitation. It would dominate headlines. The White House would scramble. Congress would demand answers. So, why is Africa treated differently? That's not a rhetorical question. And it's not just about media bias. It's about what people have come to expect, or more dangerously, accept, when it comes to African politics. And that's where this moment becomes more than a tweet. Because Uganda isn't some fringe state playing war games in isolation. It's a US ally, a military partner, a recipient of millions in Western aid. So when its army chief cozies up to a coup-born leader who's actively shutting out the West, someone has to ask, who's setting the agenda here, and how long before that handshake becomes strategy? To understand the stakes, it helps to step back and look at the room Traoré just walked into. Not literally, but ideologically. Because in that room, military uniforms outnumber suits, and praise flows more freely for defiance than for development. That shift isn't accidental. It reflects a frustration, raw, real, and generational. And like most frustrations, it starts with something painfully human: disappointment. People expected democracy to work. When it didn't, they looked for alternatives. And in places where ballots failed to deliver, bullets began to look efficient, not moral, not lawful, just effective. For many Americans, the idea of supporting a coup feels alien, outrageous even. But elsewhere, it's beginning to feel like an option. And that's the paradox. The freer the world becomes in theory, the more some people turn to force in practice. That's not just a political shift, it's psychological. Because when hope breaks, power doesn't always collapse. Sometimes it mutates. And in Uganda, that mutation may have just tweeted an invitation. What happens next? Well, it depends on who shows up to the table and who walks in wearing boots. It's one thing for a general to praise a foreign coup. It's another when that general is the president's son, groomed not through sacrifice, but through surname. Muhoozi Kainerugaba didn't rise from the ranks the way soldiers usually do. He rose through proximity, through a quiet, careful design. And in Uganda, that design is starting to look familiar. Too familiar, because when a nation starts celebrating military ranks more than democratic roles, you're not watching politics evolve. You're watching it repeat itself. And the repetition is subtle at first. Early promotions, ceremonial commands, then advisory roles, special operations titles, reshuffles. Until one day, the line between soldier and successor is too blurry to trace. That moment isn't announced. It's implied. And often, it arrives after people have stopped paying attention, which is the real trick, not to shock the system, but to slowly replace it. A generation ago, President Museveni fought his way into power by resisting a military regime. Today, he's laying the foundation for his own. Not loudly, not with tanks, but with appointments. This kind of succession doesn't demand public approval. It demands time. And if time is long enough, memory starts working against the people, not for them. In the US, political dynasties rise and fall on ballots. You might not like them, but they have to be earned in public. But in some parts of the world, a last name isn't a brand, it's an insurance policy. And what happens when power becomes inherited, not earned? Public loyalty turns into performance. Dissent turns into risk. And the system becomes less about progress and more about preservation. The irony is that Muhoozi's recent tweet praised a leader who took power through force, while he himself is slowly being handed it by design. That contradiction isn't just political, it's psychological. Because when you're born into a seat at the table, you don't have to break it down and rebuild it. You just wait until the chair is empty. Most people, if given the chance to inherit power without fighting for it, would take it. That's not corruption. That's instinct. But instincts unchecked, especially when they wear camouflage, can grow into something darker. Because the issue isn't Muhoozi's ambition, it's the silence that surrounds it. And silence, like power, tends to expand until someone draws a line. The question is, who's still willing to draw it in Uganda? Some already tried. They didn't last long. But not every line has to be loud. Some start with doubt. And right now, that doubt is growing inside the very institution that once protected it. You don't need tanks on the street for a coup to start. Sometimes, all it takes is silence at the top and applause from below. Uganda hasn't had a military takeover in decades. Not officially. But unofficially, the structure is already in place. Titles passed like family heirlooms, alliances shaped behind closed doors, and power shifting without a single shot fired. What makes this even more unstable is the illusion of calm. Museveni's government still holds elections. There are still ministers, budgets, press conferences. On the surface, the machinery of democracy moves. But ask the people who challenge it. The activists, the journalists, the opposition leaders, and they'll tell you something else entirely. Because in Uganda, resistance isn't crushed with tanks. It's crushed with laws, intimidation, and silence. And that kind of quiet control, it lasts longer than chaos. Now fold Muhoozi into that picture. His online outbursts, his erratic tweets, his veiled threats. They aren't just PR disasters. They're signals. To his followers, to his rivals, to anyone trying to guess who really holds the leash. And here's where the contradiction bites hardest. Muhoozi praises Traoré as a symbol of rebellion. But rebellion, by definition, is earned. It's dangerous. It costs something. Muhoozi's path costs nothing because it's already been cleared. And that makes his admiration look less like solidarity and more like branding. In American culture, there's a phrase, fake it till you make it. But in politics, especially in fragile states, faking it has consequences. When someone who's never led a movement starts cosplaying as a revolutionary, creates confusion, especially for a young population already tired of broken promises. And this is where it becomes human. People, when pushed far enough, don't need consistency. They need clarity. They'll follow anything that looks decisive, even if it's dangerous. That's why a uniform can still outperform a manifesto. It speaks louder, it moves faster, and it doesn't ask permission. But here's the risk no one talks about. When power is built on symbolism, not substance, it collapses the moment the audience stops clapping. So, is Uganda really headed for a coup? Or is it already in the middle of one? Just slower, quieter, more palatable? Sometimes it's not the noise that signals danger. It's the choreography. And in Uganda, the next move might already be rehearsed. There's a strange trend unfolding across parts of Africa, where the louder a leader shouts anti-imperialism, the faster they run into the arms of another empire. Ibrahim Traoré cut ties with France. He banned French media, kicked out Western forces, and draped himself in Pan-African slogans that echoed like rally cries. But then came the cameras, the red carpet for Russian diplomats, the quiet meetings with Wagner-linked officials. And just like that, liberation started to look more like relocation. It's easy to sell that story to a frustrated public, especially when history has left scars. Colonialism was brutal, Western meddling is real, but pointing at old ghosts doesn't justify new chains. And here's the uncomfortable part. Traoré didn't invent this script. He's following it. Across the continent, from Mali to Niger, leaders with failing systems have discovered a formula. Blame the West, promise dignity, suppress dissent, then invite in the next powerful sponsor. It's a formula that feels bold at first, until you look closely. Because if cutting ties with Europe leads straight to Moscow or Beijing, is that sovereignty or just outsourcing? Most Americans, when they hear anti-Western, assume ideology. But in reality, it's often just leverage, a bargaining chip, one that plays well on Twitter but doesn't always reach the dinner table. People don't eat press conferences. They eat bread. And when the shelves stay empty, even revolutionary branding loses its taste. This is where things turn personal, because humans, by nature, want to believe in change. It's part of what drives protest, progress, and even forgiveness. But when change arrives wearing military boots and a smug grin, something feels off. Traoré calls it decolonization. But if decolonization comes with fewer freedoms, less transparency, and more foreign boots, just in different colors, who exactly is that helping? And isn't it strange how quickly imperialism becomes a flexible term, depending on who's writing the check? In some ways, this is less about geopolitics and more about human patterns. When a society is exhausted, it clings to symbols, flags, phrases, leaders who promise certainty, even if that certainty is built on borrowed time. So while Traoré plays the anti-imperialist on the world stage, Uganda's generals are watching closely. And not because they believe in his cause, but because they see how powerful it can be to wear the costume. And if the people applaud loud enough, who's to say they won't try it on too? A general threatens another country on Twitter, not as satire, not in anger, but as policy. In 2022, Muhoozi Kainerugaba, Uganda's top military officer, tweeted that he could capture Kenya's capital in 2 weeks. Not in a drill, not behind closed doors, publicly, casually, and completely unprovoked. What followed wasn't discipline. It wasn't dismissal. It was a promotion. And that tells you everything you need to know about how power behaves when unchecked. Because when consequences vanish, ego grows. And when ego wears a uniform, systems bend. There's a dangerous shift happening in some African military circles, where discipline is no longer a requirement, just a suggestion. Muhoozi's erratic behavior isn't just a quirk of personality, it's a reflection of structure, or more accurately, the absence of it. His social media presence, wild, unfiltered, sometimes absurd, has become more recognizable than any strategic doctrine. But what's worse is not that he posts, it's that no one seems willing to stop him. In most Western countries, a general who threatens diplomacy, mocks journalists, and turns national security into memes would be removed immediately. But in Uganda, that behavior gets reshaped as eccentricity, as if the absurd becomes acceptable when it's wrapped in legacy. And that has a cost. Because even among those who once defended him, doubt is spreading. Inside Uganda's military, sources suggest quiet discontent, not open rebellion, but the kind of silence that hardens into resentment. Loyalty, after all, doesn't survive forever on bloodlines alone. People will follow for a while, but when the vision starts to embarrass the mission, even insiders begin to shift their weight. That's a pattern not limited to Uganda. Historically, when rulers place family above function, institutions hollow out. The structure remains. The spirit disappears. And eventually, a system built to protect a country starts protecting a name. There's something deeply human about this, because most people, if handed power without cost, don't give it up. That's not corruption. It's comfort. But comfort has a shelf life, especially in volatile regions. And when that comfort becomes a show, when uniforms become stage props, the audience gets restless. Some will stay seated. Others will start whispering. And one day, quietly or not, someone will walk out. Not every regime needs to fall. Some just need to bore the people into accepting it. 40 years ago, Museveni marched into power with the promise to end dictatorship. Today, he's preparing the stage for his son to take over. Not through war, not through revolution, but through fatigue. That's what makes this moment so dangerous. Because when a population is exhausted enough, it doesn't rise, it adjusts. And in Uganda, the adjustment is already happening, slow, quiet, and bureaucratic. No tanks, no speeches, just the normalization of what used to be unthinkable. A father appoints a son. The son mocks foreign governments. The father smiles. Nothing breaks. And when nothing breaks, people stop noticing. In the West, dynasties come in the form of last names on ballots. You still have to win. But in some states, power transfers happen behind curtains, and the election becomes performance, not permission. What's striking is how efficiently this happens without public outrage. And part of that is human nature. According to multiple behavioral studies, people under chronic instability tend to prefer predictability over possibility. They don't necessarily want change. They want something that won't collapse tomorrow. So when the options are a reckless general raised in comfort or the uncertainty of resistance, many choose neither. They just stay still. This is the quiet genius of Museveni's structure. He didn't suppress rebellion by force. He made rebellion look exhausting. Muhoozi doesn't need to earn the presidency. He just needs to be the last man standing when everyone else is too tired to run. Meanwhile, the praise for Ibrahim Traoré keeps echoing in the background, as if slogans can substitute for stability, as if anti-imperialism can cover for authoritarian instincts. But real independence isn't about who you resist, it's about what you build after. And if Traoré's Burkina Faso and Museveni's Uganda share one thing, it's the absence of that next chapter, the one that never gets written, because power becomes the point, not the path. That's where things land, not with a bang, not with a coup, but with a shrug. And maybe that's the most effective strategy of all. A coup doesn't always need soldiers. Sometimes it just needs a story people stop questioning. In Uganda, there may never be a dramatic takeover. No midnight tanks, no broken palace gates. Because if the system already bends toward the air, why break what's already folding? Muhoozi's rise isn't shocking anymore. And maybe that's the most revealing part. When the unusual becomes routine, when power starts repeating itself without resistance, you don't need new rules. You just need time. And in Burkina Faso, Ibrahim Traoré plays a different tune, louder, faster, dressed in anti-colonial fire. But underneath, the tempo sounds familiar. One man at the top, critics pushed aside, a nation told to believe. Different speeches, same silence. That's where these stories intersect, Uganda and Burkina Faso. One wrapped in legacy, the other in revolution. But both circling the same outcome, power held by one, justified by fear, fatigue, or applause. And maybe that's the deeper pattern. Not who rules, but how little people expect from whoever does. If there's a warning here, it isn't loud. It's quiet, almost invisible. The slow erosion of what people believe they deserve, and the rise of leaders who are comfortable letting them expect less. So if you've made it this far, ask yourself, what are you watching this from? A democracy that still bends but hasn't broken? Or a place where names outlive systems? Drop your thoughts below, because someone has to say it, before silence finishes the job. And if you want more stories that pull back the curtain, raw, global, and unfiltered, you know what to do. We're just getting started.